look at them from far away, they're just these grayish or blackish bumpy mounds on the soil surface. When you look up close at them, they're really kind of beautiful.
Biocrusts are so exciting in the amazing ancient organisms that the community represents. They're a community of mosses and lichens and cyanobacteria that live interspersed here on the soil surface. Biocrusts are really important not only in stabilizing soils, but in adding carbon and nutrients like nitrogen into soils. These roles are becoming increasingly important as we get more arid in our climate. Water is a very limiting resource in this dry place, and so these organisms affect how water moves and sits within soils. So biocrusts are able to bind mineral soil together so that instead of dust and blowing sand dunes, we can have that stabilized soil. So I like them because they're little and because you really have to want it to see them, and I like them because the roles they play are big, and I think they're really important on these landscapes.
Biocrusts are under huge threat right now because we're seeing expanding recreational use, oil and gas development, mining, but also climate change. Climate change is not going to be good for these guys. I am Jane Belknap. I work for the U.S. Geological Survey here in Moab, Utah. And one of my main parts of my research program is studying biological soil crusts. They're the coolest stuff in the whole world. They're incredibly important for desert ecosystems. So everything that goes in or out of the soil, more or less, is mediated by these guys. They influence the water that goes in and out, so that influences water availability to vascular plants. They influence the stability of the soil, so they really, in essence, determine everything about the system.
Biological soil crusts are very tough when it comes to certain types of disturbance. They can resist all kinds of wind or hail or rainfall, but they're not very strong when it comes to being stepped on or trampled, which is one of the reasons the restoration of biocrusts is such an exciting field, because we want to be able to bring back that function in those organisms after disturbance.
I definitely think that rehab is a very, very needed part of our research program. So I have plots I put in here in the 1980s. They are not recovering. That's a long time, and they're tiny. Well, if a plot that big can't recover, then what about this 200 million acres of rangelands we've disturbed? We have, therefore, a lot of soil erosion, and once you lose your soils, you've lost the game. Soils in deserts take about 1,000 years to form a centimeter. We don't have thousands of years for those centimeters of soil we're losing when we lose the stabilizing influence of the biocrusts.
This is, I think, far and away the biggest biocrust restoration and biocrust transplantation project conducted to date. My name is Colin Tucker. I am a research ecologist for the U.S. Forest Service. And so I came into this biocrust restoration project from a basic science perspective. It kind of occurred to me that, we could improve the moss and lichen growth using these new restoration methods today, only to see a loss of these same restored communities 20 years from now. We could put all this effort into restoration and then potentially have that undone by projected future climate changes. Every ecosystem on Earth is going to see some sort of changes and likely disruption due to climate change. And we're still just kind of at the early stages of figuring out how to deal with that.
We're coming up to a climate manipulation experiment that started almost 15 years ago. With this experiment, we stay on the trail because biological soil crusts are everywhere. We don't want to accidentally step on them. This experiment is designed to try to better understand how increasing temperatures and altered precipitation patterns are going to affect dryland plants and biological soil crusts and the other organisms that live in the soil. Some of it has shown that we might need to be concerned about how they respond. We have infrastructure that allows us to actively warm the plants and soils above ambient temperatures. We also have plots where we've watered them in different ways to try to alter how precipitation happens on the plot so that we can ask questions about how temperature and precipitation affect these organisms. Looking at the warmed plots, for example, seeing the loss of those mosses and lichens suggest that those organisms might not be particularly happy in a warmer world. And so can we better understand what organisms could take their place to perform the same services?
The idea of conducting assisted migration, which is moving organisms from geographic regions that have hotter or drier climates that are similar to what we would expect to see in 50 or 100 years, moving those organisms to our current region to do restoration with.
It's not feasible right now for us to inoculate or restore crusts on any sort of large scale. An acre or two, sure, but we really don't know how to do it. My view of the future is that we're going to load tankers, you know those tanker planes that they use for fire? Well, I want to load them with soil crusts and have them just fly over the entire West and re-inoculate these surfaces. That's my dream. To get there, we have all these steps. We have to figure out how to grow them. We have to figure out how to get them to survive. We don't want to be spraying weeds around, so we also need to know a lot more about what communities live where.
We salvage harvested about 10 to 12 tons of biological soil crust from different sites across the U.S. Southwest, including on the Colorado Plateau near our target restoration sites, but also from the Mojave Desert and from the Sonoran Desert, which is also a hotter desert. And so we collected those biocrusts from those sites and brought them to our biocrust farm at Mayberry, where we cultivated them under different cultivation strategies. We harvested somewhere in the range of 200 of these biocrust sods from the Mayberry farm and then distributed them at 2 restoration sites. As soon as I can get out there, I'm really excited to see whether they're growing and whether our different source sites or different treatments are having an effect on the restoration success. What I'm really interested in and hopeful about is that over the long term, over the next decade or more, that we start seeing how these can be used as a tool for helping adapt our restoration approaches to the uncertainties and challenges of climate change.
I think we just need to be far more conscious than we are because we don't know how to fix the damage. We need people to stay on the trails. We need people, if they're going to go cross-country, walk in the washes, walk on the rocks. Especially if you see colored lichens, those are the guys that are having a really hard time recovering. So just don't even do it. Like look at them and go, whoa, those are cool, and walk somewhere else. Right now, we need to be super cautious about how we use them and realize what we're losing in exchange for what we're gaining.